Good morning. My name is Tommy Johnson, and I'm with the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. And welcome to today's Eaton Peabody's Growth Basics for Business, our monthly breakfast seminar series, which provides a forum to gain useful do-it-yourself workplace solutions and insightful, actionable tips. I want to thank Eaton Peabody for allowing us to bring you this virtual event series for this entire season. Now, I'd like to start by welcoming you all to the second installment of Growth Basics for the calendar year 2022-23. This 10-part season-long series runs from September through June. Today's topic, A Port in the Storm, How Branding Makes Organizations Resilient, is presented by the folks from Anania Bailey, a local chamber member and a frequent contributor to Growth Basics. Their business helps customers build strong brands and empower them through strategic marketing initiatives, both digital and traditional. Their services range from advertising, branding, and packaging to video production and web design. Recently, the Chamber had the privilege of working with their team to create and produce the keynote and award videos for Imagine Portland 2022. To see more examples of their work, visit ananiabailey.com. Now, like all Chamber virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all Chamber news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com, and check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Now, before we get to today's presentation, I'm excited to share that we're using a newer platform for this event series this year, StreamYard, and we're going to be using it for all of our Chamber virtual events. This platform provides many improved production and interaction elements that I think you'll be happy to see. I'd also like to remind you that if you have questions for our presenters, please type them in the YouTube chat, and we will relay them to our presenters throughout the presentation. And we'll also leave some time for question and answers at the conclusion of the event. Now, at this point, I'd like to acknowledge our presenting sponsor of Growth Basics for Business, Eaton Peabody. For the past 5+ years, Eaton Peabody has been the presenting sponsor of this series, and they continue their support again this season. Now I'd like to invite Marketing Manager Nate Levesque to say a few words.
Great. Thank you, Tommy. I want to thank the Portland Chamber for doing such a great job of putting these together and providing new and engaging content month after month. I really want to thank Anania Bailey for taking the time to share their expertise with us once again. As Tommy mentioned, they're a frequent presenter, and I look forward to their seminars every single time, and I'm looking forward to what they have to say today. So whether this is your first Growth Basics event or your 10th, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Now to the firm. For those of you that may not be familiar with Eaton Peabody, we are a full-service, Maine-based law firm with nearly 50 attorneys serving Maine clients and and businesses from offices in Augusta, Bangor, Ellsworth, and Portland. We assist companies of all sizes in a variety of industries, so whether you're an established financial institution or a small business just taking your first steps, we can help with all of your legal needs. To learn more about the services that we provide and the industries that we serve, please visit eatonpeabody.com. Also be sure to follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn to stay up to date on legal updates as well as future presentations. Thank you very much, and back to you, Tommy.
Thanks, Nate. And again, thanks again to Eaton Peabody for their continued support of this event series. Now, on to our presentation. With us today are Peter Anania, Dustin Bailey, and Nick Ragaki of Anania Bailey, three people with a wide knowledge of the importance of branding. Peter is the managing partner and the Anania of Anania Bailey. Dustin is the account executive and the Bailey of Anania Bailey. And Nick is the newest member and creative director of the Anania Bailey team. Because he has the hardest name to pronounce, his name is not included in the Anania Bailey moniker. All right, gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Thanks to the Chamber as a whole. We're very active in the Chamber. Tommy mentioned that project we did. We had a great time doing it, and the Chamber's been really proactive. And Dan, this whatever is going on here, this is awesome. This has got me really excited. I wish you could do our webinars all the time.
And we're switching to StreamYard.
Yeah, Dustin's excited too. And I saw Bob Labrie. Hi, thanks for putting something in chat. Just if anyone wants to put in chat, say hi before we dig in. That would be great. We'd love to hear from you. So a little bit about who we are. Tommy alluded to this a little bit. We are a full-service branding and advertising agency based out of Westbrook. Tell you a little bit about our brand and our culture. our culture comes from, what's important to us is building great relationships built on trust and honesty. When you work with us, you'll find that we're direct. We don't like to use jargon. We're not yes men. We're going to tell you exactly what we think, and we're not going to shy away from the truth. We really work to truly understand your business, your goals, your anxiety. So you feel like we're not a contractor, but a partner. We're very prescriptive. And as Nick says, clients always know where we stand, and we always stand by our work. So as an agency, we really work to be that trusted partner with managing your account, but also trusted when it comes to getting the creative that's going to get the results you're looking for, whether that's with your brand or an ongoing campaign. So I always like to set the stage with these webinars where this presentation we've cut down a little bit, but I still want to take a second and set the stage before I throw this off to Nick and Dustin. And I picked a quote from the Washington Examiner that I saw yesterday. I'm kind of trying to set the stage here just to see how timely of a topic this is. And the quote is, "There's now a 100% chance of a recession in the United States by October of next year, according to new economic modeling by Bloomberg that was released on Monday." So, put in the chat if you've seen headlines like this. I've certainly have. And what's clear is that we are going into uncertain times. Whether it's going to be a recession or not, that's up for economists to debate. But it's we have the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates. We have a war for talent, 2 jobs for every job seeker out there, and we also have a war going on in Ukraine. So there is certainly some uncertainty out there, and I don't want to paint too dark of a picture because I truly believe that recession, it starts to become a mindset for all of us, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not sure if anyone else feels that way, but whether we're going into a recession or not, your organization is likely facing some upward hill with some challenges you're facing. That might be, hey, I want to grow my business. I want to recruit new talent, or I want to improve my operations. And there might be some other things, some upward hill that you're facing. So what we're going to talk about is really how your brand can help you face these challenges and overcome this upward climb. So with that, Nick, I'm hoping you can fill us in a little bit, talk about exactly what is a brand so we can all kind of get on the same page. Oh, you're muted, Nick.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about branding, I think it's important that we're all working from the same kind of shared definition. There's a lot of text on the screen. Don't be intimidated. Basically, what a brand is just what your audience and what the public at large thinks when they hear your brand name. So I think this is something that a lot of us maybe intuit but don't actually think about. But branding actually started over a century ago. Cattle ranchers would brand their animals, and then they'd ship their animals to Chicago. And in Chicago, in slaughterhouses, they would know which cows belonged to which ranches because they were branded, and that gave rise to companies in initially Chicago and elsewhere in the 19th century making all kinds of different products and putting their own brands on them. Brands have gotten more complex since then, obviously. David Ogilvy, who's famously kind of the father of branding in many ways, describes modern branding as the intangible sum of a product's attributes. And that's kind of what we're talking about here today. It includes your logo, it includes how you look, your voice, your culture and values, but really it's everything that the public and your employees know about your name and your branding. So that can be factual, like your product comes in a blue box. It can be emotional, like you care about family values. And the big thing that we're trying to emphasize here is that your brand name, your brand as a sum total lives kind of objectively. People can see it, it's fixed, but it really only exists in people's mind. It's the sum total of everything you have. And that's, I think, why it's such an important thing when we're talking about a leverage point for giving you major advantages in the marketplace, being a bulwark against instability, and being something that you want to jealously guard. You know, trademark, intellectual property, all of these legal concepts that we're very familiar with today came out of branding and kind of these initial companies taking advantage of brands in the 19th century.
And so to kick off how branding is a vehicle for growth, I'm just going to give my quick little point before I hand it over to Dustin and Nick, who really are the experts with this in our process internally. But the one point I want to make is that when all else is equal, stronger brands always win. And that isn't, you can have a service company like a law firm like Eaton Peabody. And when they're competing with other law firms, when all else is equal, their perception of their brand is going to allow them to win that client. I also, in my notes here, I have an example of a landscaper. Let's say I have a landscaper coming to my house. One has just a white truck, no marketing materials, and is the same price as the one that comes with the truck that's wrapped, has all the marketing collateral, the messaging that really resonates with me. When all else is equal, I'm going to go with the landscaper whose brand I associate with more and relate to more. So before I kick it over to Dustin and Nick again, I just wanted to point out, when all else is equal, stronger brands always win. I know Bob Labrie, I'm guessing he's nodding his head yes, because in the sales world, having that strong brand is just that extra tool in the tool set that allows you to win that account.
Yeah. And another thing that we like to talk about when we're talking about branding as a tool for growth is branding really helps you sort of both stand out from the competition and take over whole industries if you're really good at what you do and you're good at branding. I mean, obviously, a good brand alone isn't going to save you if your product is subpar, right? But branding establishes territory and really elevates the perceived professionalism that you have by your audience. Innovative brands create actually whole new verticals, which is really interesting. We've seen a lot with social media, for instance. Facebook start off with a very basic concept. They were just creating a college Facebook, putting it online. And then over time, they not only were innovating, but they were building that brand too. People started to ask whether it was coming to their college campus. People started to feel like they wanted to be included because being on Facebook meant something. It wasn't just a question of participating in the product, but it was a question of being able to say that you use that product, right? Facebook grew pretty quickly and then was able to evolve. And now there's a whole new vertical in social media that people are competing in, largely because of the strength of the Facebook brand, as well as the concept of the product that they're bringing to the table. Now you've got a whole industry based around competing and in some cases out-competing Facebook, now Meta, at their own game, which is really compelling. Another one, this is kind of a gold standard. I don't imagine we have a lot of Googles here attending today, but Google's another great example of a brand that's able to stand out from the competition. Google not only came into a crowded search engine environment, for those of us who still remember the original version of the internet, Googling something, literally turning your brand into a verb, didn't happen until Google was able to really take over that entire space. And in the last 15 years, it hasn't had a competitor because the brand Google is so well known that other organizations that try to join that same search industry, they simply can't compete. Nobody Bings anything, right? And that's also forced other competition to sidestep them. So other organizations, I'm going to go back to the social media example for a second, Instagram, TikTok, are trying to emphasize their search engines as a means of searching for news, searching for information, because they can't compete with Google on that same space, because nobody thinks about a search engine as anything else than Google. In the same way you don't think about tissues as anything else other than Kleenex in many cases. So really a strong brand can stand head and above the competition, and in some cases totally neutralize them in that space. And that helps to bring customer loyalty too, right, Dustin?
That's right. As we're talking about branding being a vehicle for growth, having a strong brands and strong branding generates trust, and that trust generates loyalty, and loyalty generates sales. So, when we're thinking about this, brand loyalty is everything, to your customers. We're all, one of the jokes I like to make, right, is looking at all three of us here, is that we are all three very different coffee drinkers. I go to Dunk's, Nick wants to go to Tim Hortons, and Peter's going to Cumberland Farms. So everybody has a certain loyalty to the products that they like for different reasons, and building that loyalty over time is really important because it builds habits, it builds routine, and it builds business. So, you have to be able to build that trust, and building that trust, you have to build the relationship with your customers. You have to resonate with their values. You have to have a story that they can relate to, or that they can support. And, you need to have that consistency across everything. And I think, Nick, you kind of pointed it out, right? It's that sum total of everything that is your brand. So inside, outside, every part of it is a piece of your brand itself. And, one of the things that I like to constantly lean back on is that people do more for the brands that they love. So building that customer loyalty is super important when you're thinking about your brand as a vehicle to growth. And then, of course, once you have that loyalty, good branding supercharges your marketing performance. So not just having your brand awareness out there, but performance marketing goes hand in hand with your brand marketing. They work in tandem to produce the best results because people know you, they're aware of what you do, and then having an effective performance marketing campaign is really builds off of what you've already established for your long-term success. Strong brands and strong branding allows you to have that foundation for awareness. It allows you to be, memorable when the time comes to take action. And it allows for stronger storytelling. A stronger brand will allow you to be able to speak on not just your values, but on the kind of stories that relate to customers that matter. Every one of us have a brand where we've looked at the two of them in the market, and we've seen, how do we want to, how do we connect to one or the other, and how that changes our buying habits, how it changes us over the long term. And, everyone knows, I don't travel very often, but I always find it funny because we don't have BP up here in Maine at all. But I will always remember the BP oil spill. And every single time I drive a couple of states south, I remember, I now see their gas stations still. And I'm like, how's this still a thing? So, everybody has those kind of connections to branding. So it's really important to know what you're capable of when you have a strong brand, you have strong branding at your backbone. And for supercharging your marketing performance, you're able to use that creative, use that backbone to really get the most out of any campaign you're going to have, whether it's for recruiting or whether it's for growing your business.
Well, and the other thing, and this will be the last point that we make before we take a moment to answer any questions, because we don't want to inundate you with points over and over. But the big thing here for branding, when we're talking about growth, is also the way that it allows you to command high prices. When people recognize your brand, they inherently trust you almost on some level, unless in Dustin's case, they recognize your brand because you spilled a record amount of oil into the Gulf. Typically recognizing your brand is a good thing. And that means that people are going to turn to you when the stakes are high. They want to turn to a brand that they can trust. They're not paying for a brand in the same sense that it's conspicuous consumption. I want a Louis Vuitton bag. In this case, they're paying for your brand because they want something that they can pay for security. They can put their money down and rest easy, knowing that people who know what they're doing, people with a good reputation, have sort of, they're in those person's arms, they're in those good hands. And so a big part of commanding high prices is that you have a perceived value. apart from obviously conspicuous consumption, which we've all seen 1,000 times before. People buying a brand name pair of sunglasses, brand name bags, brand name shoes, obviously brand name cars. There's an assumption there that you're going to have quality. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that when we're talking about higher branding equals higher prices, there's also a pejorative suggestion that off-brand is a bad thing. That if you're not the brand, that if you're a lesser known brand, or if you're the notorious grocery store brand, the unbranded, the unwashed, that you're a bad thing, right? I often refer when my son is crying and wants mom, and my wife isn't around, that I'm off-brand mom. Right, I'm not quite as good. There's something a little funny about the beard that's not typically associated with mom, right? He puts up with it, but that's not really what he wants, and he's going to ultimately be happier when mom comes back, right? And that's a little bit of what we mean when we talk about off-brand. And by building a solid brand, a brand that has a well-known reputation, a brand whose values are clear in people's minds, you're able to, I think, to command a higher price and build your prices over time, which is great when you're talking about not just immediate growth, but growth that's sustainable.
Great. And I saw a question come in, but Dustin, just to be clear, I don't want to be associated with Cumberland Farms coffee. Maples in Yarmouth is my preferred choice, but
Here we go. Okay.
It is not open before I head into the office.
Got it.
So the
So
question,
you're just making do. It's okay. We have those brands too. Making do brands.
here's the question. Can you go a little deeper into the difference between performance marketing versus brand marketing? Dustin, I think this is in reference to what you were speaking about.
Yes. So I know I stumble a little bit here when we're talking about the different styles of marketing. So brand marketing, is really aimed at brand awareness. It's getting the word out. It's getting exposure to the brand itself. It comes in many different ways, and a lot of it is more of the traditional kind of form of marketing. You've seen this forever in posters and radio, in TV. Those are very, very common, and a lot of that is brand marketing itself. Performance marketing is more tying the marketing that is built to an action. So finding a measurable performance action from the advertising that you're producing. So essentially, like for an example, performance marketing would be like, we have this tethered to a goal. We're trying to sell wallets. I just bought a wallet, and they got me. I was on Instagram. They had the right deal. They had the right kind of flag on my face and asking, having that call to action to jump in and take advantage of the deal right now. I did. I jumped right in, read all the details, knew exactly the product I was going to be going for, had a very easy 2 to 3 steps, and then bam, I bought that wallet. So I'm going to have a new one show up in about a week or so. So really thinking about, how is your brand being activated for bringing awareness, and how is your brand being activated for performance, for having a tangible action that is being taken? That's your real difference between performance marketing and brand marketing, sort of on the face of it.
All right. Thank you. Now to shift gears and to talk about how branding has an impact on attracting and retaining talent. Dustin alluded, he just talked about performance marketing. Well, there's also recruitment marketing. And branding, really, as Dustin said, supercharges marketing, performance marketing, and recruitment marketing. It's the foundation for it. When we think about recruiting, from a branding and marketing perspective, we think of really 4 things that impact it. That's how strong is your offer as an organization? How strong is your compensation? How strong is your perks? What's your internal culture like? Are you living and breathing your brand, your mission, your vision that Nick's going to be talking about in this slide and the next? Are you holding employees up to your core values? Are you building employee ambassadors? Also, what's your employer brand? So what's that perception out there in the marketplace for you as an employer? And Dustin's going to go a little bit into that with what's your employer promise. And then also what are you doing for recruitment marketing? So these are kind of the four levers within recruiting and retaining talent that you can pull on. And, within those four levers is the formula where the key to recruiting and retaining talent relies. And Nick, just one kind of funny thing, because I don't think you were on this last webinar, but you brought up Google, and Dustin and I just did an employer branding webinar. And one example we showed is this movie called The Internship, where Google's brand was so strong that they, without even paying for it, got a major motion picture built around how awesome of a company it is to work for and how sought after it is. So that's really the strength of employer branding and how it can have an impact on recruitment marketing. You can have, the strongest employer brands out there are having blockbuster pictures made after their brand. So with that, Dustin, I'm wondering if you could take us through employer promise.
Yeah. So, when we're kind of talking about that, right? Your employer brand and what you're thinking about as a brand to employees, you have to really think about your unique employer promise. So, your promise that you're making to your employees is going to be a big part of your brand. And whether you think about it or not, it's always one of the things that people are going to be talking about. It's one of the best sources of referrals for both growth and both for recruitment, is having that strong brand and having that connection for employees to draw from. So, when we're kind of looking at it, it goes beyond just offer and benefits. A lot of it is, sort of built into culture. What makes you unique as an employer from a brand perspective is going to go all the way to how you treat your employees, how you value your employees, and how you are going to be, differentiating yourself, from your competitors by meeting their needs and providing something that you and you alone provide. So a lot of times you're going to find when you're looking back on that, it's what you're promising to them. How is that, resonating with your core values, you as a brand? Those kinds of things, when we're thinking about it, really need to be first and foremost when talking about employer branding. You have to ask some of the tough questions, to really get down to the bottom of it. Do you have an amazing work culture, and where people truly feel like they belong inside of work and when they're outside of work? Do you have a unique mission? Are you working towards something, and is everybody right there, lockstep with you? And does your mission, make tangible differences, in the community, in the world around us? There are some very distinct like practices that can kind of go into how to identify some of these items. We'd go through a whole webinar series essentially over that alone, but it's really important to take a step back and think about, what is your brand? What is the promise you're trying to make your employees? And how does that influence your culture and make it align?
And thinking about aligning with your culture is just so critical to this, and it can be a little intimidating, frankly. The idea of an office culture, how to build one, how to create one, I think is for many people a very steep mountain that it feels like you need to climb. And in a lot of cases, you're already sitting on a culture, or you're already sitting on elements that you've naturally included into the company that you run, the company that you founded, that you can take advantage of. A good example I'm going to bring up, we'll call them Client X. So we have a Client X that has a 100-year history. They've been around for a very, very long time. And, when they came to us, they were really concerned that their brand might feel outdated. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely parts of their design, parts of their logo that were very, very outdated. But when it came to their culture, when it came to what their cultural brand was, there was a lot of very, I mean this in the least political way possible, a lot of very progressive values that they have that people are looking for in the marketplace. a marketplace, right? They're employee owned. They bring employees directly to work sites so that they don't have to worry about employees having cars, having the ability to drive, having excuses like my car broke down, right? They put a lot of emphasis on work-life balance. This has been a family-owned company for over 100 years. And so rather than trying to build some new culture or try to establish different values around who they are, who they want to appear to be, who they think it's trendy to be, they're able to really emphasize the values that they already have. Their brand becomes not just competitive, but industry leading, because the values that they've had the whole time they've been around are values that really people are seeking right now. And trying to find what people are looking for as employees and aligning that with your brand is really going to help you be a higher performer too.
Indeed. And I think that's kind of the next step for everybody right now too, is like, not just finding new employees, because that's already a huge challenge for everybody, but how are we retaining them? And brand is a big answer to that, because, like I've said earlier, brand loyalty is just about everything. And especially for employees. Employees that believe in the mission and resonate with those core values are just more motivated. They're more motivated to stay. We've had those kind of jobs where like, I really like this company, so I'm going to stick with it for a little bit longer. I'm going to stick with them and I'm going to do, X, Y, Z. We have those experiences from time to time, and it makes it very difficult to up and leave and go to another company. So, for a lot of businesses right now, whether you are a small, a small shop of only a couple of people, or if you're one of the larger tech companies here in Maine, you're having that challenge generally when you're thinking about, okay, how am I trying to keep people here, and what's a good reason for them to stay? And that resonating value is going to be important. Strong brands, who are going to use these tools, who are going to really ask themselves the tough questions, really think about what they're promising their employees, are going to be able to not just get more, out of an essential worker, but, really be able to develop that entire sense of culture and community around people. And that, we've all been on either, a sports team or in a group project at school, where if everybody is on the same page and everybody's communicating and everyone has that foundational culture sort of built into it, we perform better. The project comes out better. The team wins the game. Better teams are built with stronger ties, and stronger ties can easily go all the way back to how your brand is built out, how it's communicated, and how it's authentically in the marketplace. Because essentially at the end of the day, you want your employees not just to be high performing, and retained, but they want to bring in the same kind of people. And you want them to be, your ambassadors, right, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, when you're able to bring consistent external messaging from your employees, it drastically changes how likely people are to stay, how likely they are to recruit, but also a lot less work that you need to do as an owner or a manager of a company, because your employees are doing a lot of that legwork yourself. When you clearly define your brand, employees are able to articulate what their work is. They're able to say, I do X or Y. They're able to very clearly connect to it, rather than trying to reach for maybe jargon that they've heard their boss talk about, or trying to come up with their.
Is that just Nick?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's just Nick.
Oh.
Yeah. Hold on.
Sorry,
hiccup.
When you're able to give an employee a sense of what the big picture is, what their job adds up to, they have pride in what they do. They understand what their role is in the company. They understand their importance, and they can understand what that big picture is. And then they can discuss that and articulate that to others, saying, I do X, and that matters because of Y, right? And people become proud of the work they do. They want to talk about the difference that they're making. They want to talk about the difference that they're a part of. It adds up to having your employees becoming brand ambassadors who end up using your brand language and talking about their positive experiences. That means that they're less likely to leave, but also importantly, particularly in this environment, it means they're more likely to recruit other people as well. People are hearing about something that sounds exciting, sounds like changes are being made, sounds like they're relevant, right? And people want to be part of that. People want to join that. And that's really why consistent external messaging really helps to not only keep the employees that you have, but potentially recruit more.
All right, thanks. That was great, Nick. Thanks. I know we have a comment from Bob and Demetria. I see you're in Westbrook. We'd love to hear from you. We're out of Westbrook. Chelsea, if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you as well. The one question we do have is about employee expectations, feeling that they have skyrocketed. If we have any thoughts on that, I guess I welcome your thoughts on this, Nick, but I'll kick us off. Employee expectations certainly have changed, and it goes back to how I was framing this webinar before we dug in. There's 2 jobs available for every 1 job seeker. So yeah, the competition is fierce, and employee expectations have skyrocketed. That's just basic supply and demand. So yeah, it's certainly a challenge, but I always go back to the 4 pillars that I talked about at the beginning of this slide. How strong is your offer? How strong is your internal culture? How strong is your employer brand? And how strong is your recruitment marketing? And meeting the expectations of your employees and attracting employees is somewhere within that mix and that formula. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that I'd get back to kind of the example that I used just a couple minutes earlier, sort of a variation on it, right? Is that employee expectations have 100% changed. I think that you're seeing expectations definitely rising, people expecting more in a lot of different ways, more culturally, more financially. Benefits they're looking to change and evolve. That can be really hard. It can be hard to keep up with that. But a lot of what they're demanding are things that you may already have. You may already have a very strong culture internally, Christmas parties, days off, professional development days, trying to find work-life balance. I mean, a lot of us have built some of these elements into our companies from the get-go. And people just need to hear that. They need to know that. You're likely already sitting on a lot of the things that employees are looking for or employees are hoping to find. And it's really just a matter of trying to find what those things are and elevate those, make sure people are more aware of those. The other thing that I would say is take a look at some of the things that you've played with the idea of, or that you wouldn't mind. It's no skin off your back. You're not gonna worry about losing too much money if you introduced benefit X or cultural element Y. There's a lot of stuff that you could probably add or change without it becoming fiscally really constrictive. So take a look at who you are. Take a look at genuinely who you are as an organization, and figure out what you're already providing that might meet some of these rising expectations. Because most of us already have a lot of that.
Yeah, and if you have questions, ask your employees. Start there. It's a good place to start if you have questions around it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So playing into that is the final section here, which is really operations, and using branding to help with operational efficiency, help evaluate employees, how to build employee ambassadors, how to, guide a team towards a common vision. So Dustin, kick us off here.
So if anyone's seen any of our previous webinars, I always talk about the fact that your brand is a living, breathing thing. It's extremely important that you understand that it's not a set it and forget it, one-off kind of thing. It is something that requires maintenance. It requires consistency. It requires you to invest in it, on a routine basis, and to really make sure that you are getting the most benefit out of it. You need to constantly troubleshoot and identify, what's working, what's not working, what's aligning, what's misaligning, and going through that. So strong brands aren't just those who identify these things, but it's also moving forward. It's following through after identifying these things, changing what needs to be changed, living up to the promises that are set for both the customer and for employees, and really making sure that you're living up to the ideals you set down. I think in part of our process, and Nick can kind of speak to this much more in depth, I think, is that a lot of times we sit down and we have those lofty conversations in the beginning of a rebrand, and we talk about the highest ideal that we could possibly attain to, and then we kind of scale it back and say, okay, well, what is attainable for this organization, and let's make this a practical thing that you can live, breathe, and eat. Oh.
Sorry, my son is running around in the back. You can't see him. He's just a little too short to fit on the screen. Every now and then I have to mute it. You know what I mean? So he's not unintentionally the fourth member of the presentation. But there are three common tools that I think are really useful for leadership to help articulate both their brand, both publicly and privately, and really push culture. The first one is a vision, and people often confuse vision and mission. Your vision is kind of it's the world you want to live in. It's you're just trying to articulate the shared sense of purpose, and if you have done everything that your company is meant to do, what does the world look like, right? The best part about vision is that it helps to really give staff pride in being part of something bigger than themselves, right? Where this is the grand, beautiful new world that we're trying to achieve. Then you have your mission. And your mission is what you do to realize that world, what you're doing to realize that vision, right? Your mission should provide both kind of a goal that's aspirational, but also attainable, right? So your mission should be something that provides a little bit of discipline and direction for your brand positioning. You don't want to have mission creep. You don't want to start doing something and then, well, that seems kind of interesting and I'd love to be more part of the community here, and now we're going to include this here, and the next thing you know, your mission is huge and wide and impossible to attain. By articulating a specific mission that's meant to achieve your vision, you can keep your company rolling very on strict, achievable rails. And then the final thing that we talk about a lot are your values, and that's how do you go about completing your mission? What's the way that you're going to meet the mission that you've described? And that's kind of making a contract that you're making with one another. You're making it with your audience. You're making it with your clients. You're making it with your employees, right? You want to, kind of a bonus tip here when we talk about values, you want to spend less time enforcing culture because your staff will kind of help to do it for you when you have the right values, right? So if you're able to articulate some clear values and your staff sees those and embodies those, when they see people who are operating outside of the culture you're trying to establish, let's say it's a supportive culture, a positive culture, and you've got a real, skunk at the garden party out there who's just cynical and toxic and making everything really hard, your staff are going to help to put that person in line. You won't have to. And if you have really toxic employees or people that are bringing your organization down, having clearly defined values or a clearly defined mission will kind of help provide some clear reasons of letting go of that toxic employee. Where not having values like that or not having a mission means that you're largely kind of stuck with this person that's not great, but you can't really articulate why, and you can't really articulate to them what's not going well other than you've got an attitude problem, right? Clear values really give you a lot of tools to find your North Star, sail towards it, and keep everybody on the boat in line and also inspired.
And along those same lines, Nick, I have my bullet point is change becomes more manageable. And when we work with organizations, the ones who have this figured out, they have this internal part figured out, the branding is just so much more impactful because it just change. This is an organization used to change. This is an organization that's living and breathing these things. So the brand is just another tool to bring these things to life. But as Nick said, as a leader in an organization, that mission, that vision, those core values are just so useful to lead a team towards a common vision and mission. So whatever your vision is, it just becomes a lot easier to have these tools. And as Nick said, evaluating, when I think he said when you have, was it skunk? Was that what you said?
Skunk at the garden party, yeah.
Skunk at the garden party. It's just very clear. Here's how we're all being evaluated. Here's where we're going. Here's our mission. Here's our core values. Are you living up to these core values? And this is something that we live and breathe as an organization on a monthly basis. We're having these discussions with each team member, just because that's how important this is for us to get to that vision. This mission and our core values are that important and that much of a tool that we personally do it on a monthly basis.
Yeah, and you know, when all these start becoming reality, when time and effort and investment has been put into building and maintaining these core structures, your values, your mission, your vision, it really does create a strong brand. And a strong brand is a lot easier to align your culture to than the adverse, so it becomes easier to identify who's going to be a good cultural fit, who's going to be that toxic outlier, who's going to be really resonating within the with the brand itself. It allows you to act as one whole, as a whole team, towards customers, towards other employees, to vendors, subcontractors, etc. It's so important that once you have that aligned, everybody is more apt to be a brand ambassador, is more apt to be what you want them to be as a customer facing entity, and and everyone acts as an extension of that. So when your culture becomes aligned with your brand, every person is wearing the colors, every person is talking about the brand itself, and they are a positive force for growth, for recruitment, for for operations, all the way around, because everybody is in line. They understand what they're all working towards. They feel at home. They're part of a team, and you can really take advantage of real teamwork when everyone is resonating with it.
Absolutely. And on the downside, when you have misalignment, poorly aligned brands and culture present really big problems. Some of us may have experienced this as owners of organizations. I think almost everybody has experienced this at some point as an employee somewhere where you've come across a place with a broken culture. But it creates huge problems, particularly if you're trying to grow, and especially in the environment that we're in right now. A good example of a broken culture is I'm going to use the Amazon example. That's one that you may have seen in the news over the last couple of years. But the problem here isn't that Amazon has a bad reputation exclusively, right? They've got a bit of a bad reputation with employees. The problem started with a fundamental misalignment. Amazon is putting smiles on the side of their boxes, right? They're talking a lot about investing in their staff. And then some public issues around work culture come out. We hear that there are no bathroom breaks. We hear a reputation for union smashing. People start to dive in and find that there are very few benefits that workers who are paxing those smiley face boxes are doing so for 14 hours at a time with very limited breaks, without an opportunity to eat. And that's not only heartbreaking, but incredibly ironic and antithetical to the brand that they're putting forward, right? And so what they're doing is they're hurting both their brand and their bottom line. When news like this got out, Amazon stock dropped by like 14%, right? After reporting on the conditions came out. And the lesson there is that, one, if we've seen anything anywhere, it's that when bad news comes out, it's always bad. Even if you're not a national brand, even if it's a local story, it's going to hurt your company. But the bigger lesson here is that you shouldn't make promises that you either can't keep or know that you won't keep. Brands need to be genuine, and that's doubly so when you're making a promise to employees, or when you're putting forth a particular brand that people start to associate you with publicly. when you're thinking about your culture, when you're thinking about how you align it, be honest with yourself, do some soul searching, decide what you are and what you aren't, and you can't try to be something that you're not as a brand for very long. People will find out, they'll smell it out, it'll feel disingenuine, and it's gonna hurt. And that's really something important to think through. I can't underscore that enough.
Great. I think Amazon's the perfect example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any questions following up on that?
I saw one. And I guess this is the point, any questions within operations, but also just any general questions. I see one popping up there. We recently developed our core values and mission statement. Do you have any advice for getting everyone on board? Nick, you are the perfect one to answer that one. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, while you're developing those core values and developing your mission statement, it's also just as a pro tip. I don't know if you've done this as part of this process or not, but it's always really helpful to make your current employees feel like they're part of that process, that they're not just assigned suddenly a new mission. This is the new direction. Obviously, you don't want all your employees telling you what direction the company should be going in, but it's really important when you're doing any kind of rebrand or brand pivot, brand refresh, to make sure that you're bringing everybody along with you when you do that. So that's kind of just a general process-oriented piece. But the second thing I would say, particularly when you're talking about core values and mission, is if you're trying to get people on board, you have to give them something that they can repeat and that they can memorize. Looking to Peter and Dustin here, I can't count how many times we've either been working with an organization that we're working on a rebrand with, or one that we start working with and that ultimately goes, ooh, I think we might need to rebrand, because their core values are 8, 10, 12 values, right? Or because their mission statement is a paragraph long. That's really hard. It's really hard for anybody to see clarity in that, to memorize that. But also when it comes to values, to be able to say, this is what I see in myself. This is what I see in my work today. This is who I want to be. This is who I want to hold my fellow employees accountable to being. So I would say a good core element of any rebrand here is keep those core values down to 3, 4 core values, make them short, and try to be really surgical about them, and do your best not to make them the same values that everybody else has. We're honest, we're hardworking. Everybody tries to be that.
Quality.
Yeah. There's some core values that are more specific to who you are. And what I would also say is when you're thinking about how you want to approach those core values, think about whether they're relevant to everybody in the company. It's really easy, I think, and I think anybody who's been managing or leading a team or an organization or knows their product very well tends to miss the forest for the trees. I've definitely seen some core values out there that say, we're going to be open and transparent with our finances at all times. Excellent. That's great. Most of their employees are not dealing with the books. Most of their employees are on the line. Most of their employees are out doing construction, right? It's an important value to have. Is it essential value that everybody in your company is going to see, reflect, and resonate with? So I think that's another big one. If you can keep them simple, if you can keep them relevant, and if you can keep them repeatable, you're going to end up with employee ambassadors instead of people who stumble into a job, don't really know what they represent. They're putting in their 9 to 5. They're calling it a day. Those employees are going to come and go. But employees that really see themselves reflected in your values and mission, those people will stay, and you'll see them really get on board with what you're trying to do.
Thanks for that, Nick. And I just to if you have any other questions, Dustin, he's our account executive. I have his email here, Dustin with a Y at AnaniaBailey.com. Also, you can just schedule a consultation just to say hi or any other questions you might have. Dustin is certainly a geek with everything branding. So just go to calendly.com/Dustin-Bailey. Like us on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. And thank you again to the Chamber and Pete and eBody. This is a great event to have, and thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
think Tommy's coming in here. Here he is. Thank you, Tommy. You're muted, Tommy.
There we go. Sorry about that. Computer didn't want to respond. Thank you guys for a great presentation and some great questions from the audience too. Great interaction. Thanks again, Peter, Dustin, and Nick. And thanks to the Chamber staff also for helping to produce another successful event. Thanks to everyone for attending today and throughout this year. If you're interested in learning more about branding, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with links to additional resources. Another shout out to our sponsors, Eaton Peabody, for their support of the Growth Basics for Business series this entire year. We look forward to seeing you again on November 22nd when we're going to hear from our friends at Marshall Communications on the topic of podcasting. The Eaton Peabody Growth Basics for Business series is typically held on the second or third Tuesday of each month. So with that, have a wonderful rest of your day, get outside, and enjoy your week.